Jedi Survivor has been released in inexcusable state on every platform. The game is unplayable for majority of PC users and struggles to keep the steady frame rate on every console. Even when performance mode on PS5 displays the game in 864p. But you may ask how the game is outside the performance, although we have to take the performance under consideration when we rate the game, unfortunately. But yes, unfortunately, because the game itself is really pleasant to play when it works. I personally abandoned my PC version and took on PS5 version, and at times when the frame rate is stable, it's a really enjoyable game that of course has really huge amounts of performance issues and technical issues that I'm going to mention later in this video. So let's start from this. This game takes place 5 years after Jedi Fallen Order and continues the story of Cal Kestis and his crew. This time we are trying to find the planet called Talanor that is outside the Empire's reach. It's basically the place when everybody that is prosecuted by the Empire can live in peace. And for the first time we get the topic of High Republic mentioned outside of the books and comics, which is really nice to see because I personally really want to see High Republic more present. It's a really interesting and enjoyable era. It's really makes me happy to see High Republic mentioned in Jedi Survivor. And this game actually shows us that there are still remains of High Republic, the technology, the tempo, and some other stuff. Gameplay wise, not much has changed. The core gameplay is like the same, but the changes are outside of the core gameplay because you still have to block or parry or counterattack, but we have something to choose how we play the game. We have stances, for an example, and each stance has the attached type of gameplay change to it. You can use single sword, you can use double bladed sword, you can use blaster, which allows you to shoot blaster during a fight and reloads itself when you fight enemies with your saber, which is really nice and kind of adds more diversity to the gameplay, but it's still the same as a core gameplay. You still block, you still counter, you still do the same thing that you did in the Jedi Fallen Order. But some fixes to this gameplay formula would be nice, because you see, this is what I'm going to tell you right now. I can't even show you the gameplay for it. Why? Because it happens in the 3 boss fights that are treated as spoilers, so I can't show it in this review if I want to keep it non-spoiler. Enemies tend to spam constantly one and the same attack constantly without any cooldown for them. Sometimes even if you are outside of their reach, they will magically teleport and grab you anyway. This happened in all three boss fights throughout the game, to the point when I decided to switch from Jedi Master difficulty, which is hard, to Jedi Knight, which is normal. At the beginning of the game I chose Jedi Master because the game seemed way too easy, but later the appearance of new enemies and some hitboxes made my gameplay miserable. When I see that my sword is going through the enemy and the game treats it like a dodge, something is really not working here. And to be fair, you can also dodge and the enemy's weapon is going to go right through you, and I wasn't a fan of this thing in the first game, and I'm still not a fan of this in this game. Another thing worth mentioning is that some missions will have NPC going with you, keeping you company and help you fight. At some points it's really helpful. For an example, you can just wait and Marin or Bode, the new character in the game, will finish the enemies by themselves. You don't even have to hit them. And of course, terrain is more open to our exploration. I would love to traverse through the Kobok and Jeddah, but the performance that is present right now, pre-patch, I don't have this joy of exploration that I had with Jedi Survivor. That worked kinda wonky, but still more steadily than this game. I managed to get some Ubisoft-like collectibles and finish some side content. There's plenty of things to do on these open maps. Most of them are collecting clothes from crates, scrolls, essences, scans, which are infuriating right now, because in the first game when BB1 was scanning something, it felt like he is actually scanning something important. In here, there are moments when every 10 steps you are going to wait at BB8 and let him scan another thing. Yes, you can just not let him do that, but you are losing some chunk of the game, so it's better to just let him scan these things. But the world feels more full right now than it did in Fallen Order. You can walk around the town, talk to people. There's a fisherman in few locations that is going to tell you his own story when approached, and even though his helmet sometimes makes him hard to understand, we can just turn on subtitles. Thank God for subtitles. There are also fractured echoes spread throughout the game, and the fractured echoes, to complete, you have to battle a bunch of enemies on the arena. You have a small arena, you have a circle, you have the bunch of enemies, or they are going even to spawn more of the enemies for you, and you have to finish them off. Then after completion, you're going to be rewarded 1 skill point to put in your skill tree. Some people are getting really mad about these fights from the broken echoes, because you shouldn't really take them up front. You should come back to the broken echoes when when your character gets more developed, if it comes like more health, more force power, and then these battles are incredibly easy to complete. There is a fast travel right now between the meditation spots, so there's no problem to just coming back to spot and finishing the fractured echo later. Don't get them up front. This was also something that I did. I took them up front and I was really pissed, and then I came back later, and these echoes are really easy to complete. Graphically, this game looks fine. I mean, as a PS5 edition, looks okay-ish. It is a low quality port with 864p, and the whole problem with the performance on consoles is that this game has forced ray tracing on every mode. It doesn't matter if you're going to be playing on quality mode, it doesn't matter if you're going to be playing on performance mode. The game forces you to have ray tracing on, and you cannot turn it off on consoles. And the game struggles to keep some steady frame rate, mostly in the open areas or during some cutscenes when the frame rate is going down to 20 FPS. There are heavily scripted sequences, action-packed sequences, that are keeping a really high and steady frame rate, which is odd, and this actually leads me to believe that this game just needed more time in the oven. Someone was not allowed to cook anymore, and they released half-baked product just to be done with it, and probably thought, oh, we are going to fix it later. The release is most important, because some people are not going to come back to the broken experience that they had, because they are not going to be interested anymore. The cherry on the top, if it comes to bugs and glitches, was, for an example, my last boss fight, that I'm not allowed to show in this review because it's a spoiler. When the enemy genuinely fell under the textures and I was stuck on the platform waiting, and I had to reset the game, and this clip is going to be shown at the end of this video after the review without my commentary. I will just put this clip at the end after the warning that there's going to be a heavy spoiler clip out, after the review. But here you have some actual bugs and glitches that happen throughout the game. What is happening to Merrin's face? Despite using double-bladed sword, the finisher is using one single sword, and it opens and closes when it's on Cal's belt. Getting killed by the elevator, some enemies were roller skating, the device phasing through Cal's hand. Enemies sometimes get stuck and even teleport. Scanning with BB1 sometimes doesn't work, and you have to go in circles until it catches up that there's something to be scanned. Cal jumping onto the pipe and walking on it like that. Animation didn't load for some reason. You are not supposed to be here, so we left empty wall and you can fall under the textures. The enemy can't go further, they just stuck and look at you. Pulling down objects sometimes is allowed only if you move your camera to the side, and sometimes it will even show to pull something down that is level lower from behind the wall. What the fuck are those L1s on the top of the screen? Game crashed. The last game that crashed for me on PlayStation was Mad Max on PlayStation 4. So that was actually refreshing, I would say. This amount of problems I've encountered during the game, and these things happened constantly throughout my whole game. A lot of them are probably tied to fucked up optimization of the game that, let's be honest, almost doesn't exist. And the whole picture shows us that this game was not finished, and it's released and sold for $70. And even with the performance patch that released today as of making this review, it's not going to fix all of these problems. The game still suffers from low frame rate even on performance mode, and the patch is not even 2 gigabytes of size. Is not going to fix all of these problems. They are going to have to patch this game more and more and more in the future. I love Star Wars. I platinumed the first game, The Fallen Order, and this game just needed more time to cook. And I really loved the story, and I am so happy that we get to see Merrin more in this game than in the first. She's given more screen time. She's my favorite character from these games, but unfortunately the game is not finished, and it's broken in so many places. And it's going to be probably fixed with patches, but it's going to be too late because I already finished the game. The release is the most important thing for the game. Everybody remembers that No Man's Sky was bad when it first released. Everybody knows that it's like, oh, it's fine now. But a lot of people got burned and they are not going to go back because the release was the most important thing in the lifespan of this game. If the performance and the bugs and the glitches will be fixed, one day probably the rating would be higher, but we are rating this game at the beginning of its life cycle, and it's 6.5 out of 10. I am sorry. And right now, here you go. This is your warning, this is your screen. Right now, after this screen, you're going to be shown the clip of the last fight when the enemy fell under the textures. That is going to be all for me. Bye.